experience together. A night of surging energy and frenetic football in Dortmund. It was often, honestly, like watching a six-a-side game, just end-to-end frenzy, to be honest. PSG will hear the sound of double-doinked goalposts ringing in their ears. We will touch upon last night's Royal Rumble, Bayern Munich, oh my lord, in which Real Madrid kept things eerily alive, as is their wont in Champions League football. We'll talk about Liverpool and Chelsea women, a little bit about Everton. We'll also make the case that the Conference League is where it's at this year. It's a joy to do this, not alone, but with my friend, the Athletics chief Syriac correspondent, all-round bon viveur. Welcome back to Do It live from his crib in Piazza Flamini, Rome, where he awaits the arrival of Leverkusen. Oh, benvenuto, it's Lord James Horncastle.
How are you, Conte Roger? Let's have it.
I'm all right, bub. I'm all right. I'm just glad that we're not here alone. This is a Do It Live, which means you, dear GFOPs, can be a massive part of the show. Ask us questions about football or about life. Here's how. Scan the QR code, top left of your screen. Come onto the Zoom with producer J-Dubs. He'll get you up to ask your questions. Come be with me. Come be with, the great James H. It's audio only, so do not be afraid. We'll get to your questions in a minute, but get in line now. Get in the chat. We'll be reading them through the show. Getting your likes. Click that little thumbs up thing at the bottom of the screen. Just come be with us. I want to quickly raise the third first Michelob Ultra of the day to the memory of the novelist Paul Auster, who died yesterday. A gent who was really literary Brooklyn personified. Romantic, warm, truly prolific creative novelist, both hyper-local and globally revered. Dude, massive in France. A bit like Flo Balogun, his self-styled romantic image, very, very left bank. I actually met Paul a couple of times. He's one of those open gents who made you feel like you'd known him forever within like 5 minutes of meeting him, which I love because one of his books really has shaped my own life. January 1979, Auster's father Samuel died, and that became the seed for his first memoir, The Invention of Solitude. And I buy that book for every one of my friends who's lost a parent. It's actually 2 books in one. First book is beautiful. Second book, I honestly confess, I don't fully understand. It's a bit above my pay grade. But the first book's about life, death, solitude, memory. He wrote, I always sense the future, the antithesis of everything. It's always before my eyes. I never see a child without thinking that it would grow old, nor a cradle without thinking of a grave. The sight of a naked woman makes me imagine her skeleton. I'm pretty sure Paul Auster just described Everton there, James.
Didn't Paul Auster, didn't he write a series of letters as well? Was that to J.M. Coetzee, which became a book? Maybe I'm getting mixed up with Nausgaard as well.
He was a man of letters. I think if we were properly discussing an obituary to Paul Auster, we call him writer, filmmaker, film director, and man of letters. What a thing to be, James, a man of letters.
I recently finished his last novel, Baumgartner. Sounds like a Leipzig player. It's not about some sort of journeyman
Brighton's next goalkeeper.
Exactly. But certainly with all of Paul Auster's books, never judge a book by their cover. But the cover of that book, I don't know what it's like in the US edition, but it's just a piece of art. That is so. One of the first novelists who got me into literature, postmodern. I mean, just Paul. Next time
I introduce you, I'm going to just introduce you as a man of letters. I love that you can introduce me as a man of very short, misspelt emails. I mean, that's really where I am and what I aspire to be. I do love you, James. That I can just throw out Paul Auster crap, and you will meet me there, as you will, as we break down tonight's game. Oh wonder, Portman 1, PSG 0. battle between old friends, Group F, group stage survivors, 1997 champions, if you're keeping count, and the 2020 runners-up. Dortmund 5th in the Bundesliga, meeting the champion farmers from Liga 1. This game, not just Dortmund's entire season, but their biggest European game in, I think, 11 years, facing up to Qatari, infinitely walleted PSG. Almost Dortmund, James, the last old school team left in this tournament. I mean, they really are the underdog's choice financially. They're almost like a throwback to footballing of yore.
Yeah. I mean, all they've got going for them is this wall. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's yellow. and that's it.
25,000 strong. I mean, by the way, have you ever stood in the yellow wall?
I haven't stood in it. I've looked askance at it from being at. But from seeing like some of our friends and colleagues who were there tonight, Rory Smith, for example. I mean, it's always special, is the yellow wall, but tonight in particular, yeah, it's not unusual to see the end behind the goal where there are just flags at the bottom in the kind of lowest tier, but to see them all the way up and just like this kind of regatta of like flags was of sails, really. You really get this like a human ocean, just like, you know, sort of behind the goal. And yeah, it is special. I mean, you talk about them as being this kind of not underfunded, but sort of certainly underdog club in an age of eight nations and, you know, sort of American private equity and that sort of thing coming into football. I mean, they 10 years ago they became the kind of club that, you know, it's too expensive for people in London to go and watch Arsenal, even if you live in London. So people would get the tube to Luton, get on a budget airline, fly over to Dortmund, not pay anything for an Airbnb, not pay anything for a ticket, not pay anything for beer, and basically then come back and still have enough money to spare on what they would an Arsenal ticket. So it became these incredible clubs for that.
Dortmund is very much like, you know, the dates that you hear your grandpa took your grandma on, where it was like, you know, 2 cents to get the Staten Island ferry and maybe a dime for a hot dog. That is Dortmund. I think Miguel Delaney wrote about it before the game. They are the only squad in modern times to be worth less than $460 million, which is 460 million euros, which is still an extraordinary amount of money. But they are very much like the last non-Super League-esque team standing financially in terms of that might. And you mentioned the yellow wall, the Westfalenstadion. I mean, it was rapturous. Honestly, it was a bit like watching Asgard in Thor, eager for battle, joyous attack, but susceptible to the old Ragnarok in their own rear end. And that crowd did set the tone for the frenzied, adrenaline-filled start, which Sancho began and really never ceased, leading Dortmund's forays forward. PSG's all French front three, they buzzed. I mean, Dortmund's backline going into this said to be suspect. No big chances created in the early exchanges, but there's a beautiful German word, Kopfkino, a lovely phrase, which literally means head cinema, or the fictional film that's screening in your head if you have a very vivid imagination. I do love a bit of head cinema, James. And I was shocked, ultimately, by just the beautiful imagination that Dortmund brought to this game. PSG didn't have the guile to slow the game down. I was surprised they didn't try and knock the crowd out a bit in those early exchanges. But God bless Dortmund. In those early moves, they were fearless.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about Kopfkino. I mean, the great proper British football punditry often talk about he's got a picture. He's got a picture in his head. He can just see everything, you know, as it's unraveling, and there were certainly some aspects of that to Sanchez's game today. 12 dribbles he completed, 12. I mean, like a lot of the talk around this game was, yeah, Sancho's gone back there to kind of rediscover his mojo, but you know, the real January signing for them is Maatsen, who they got from Chelsea, and yeah, Chelsea desperately need to sell. they've been sort of trying to sell their hotel back to themselves in order to sort of make their accounts look better. So Maatsen's the big star. Sancho, forget about it. And yet Sancho just tonight, just like, particularly in a game in the context where everyone's just expecting Kylian Mbappé to be the guy who blows past everyone. And it's just like, oh, look at this kid, sort of D10 Hag. Amazing.
Free and joyous and English and delirious and dangerous. Gustavo Cacayo in the chat says the Germans have to have a word for wall of flags. If you know what it is, let us know. All of this paid off. 36 minute.
David Hasselhoff will be performing on it, I imagine.
On the wall of flags.
Wall of flags.
Oh my God, that's it. By the way, I can imagine an amazingly emotional pop video. David Hasselhoff's next album, Wall of Flags, shot in Berlin on site in the year 1983, but only released now. 89-year-old Mats Hummels dropped a long bomb. Nicholas Fullkrug met the moment, almost like a beekeeper at an Arizona Diamondbacks game. Cushion that ball. Oh, James Horncastle with the touch of a tender lover. Perfectly weighted first touch at high speed, or what passes at high speed for Nicholas Fullkrug. Then lashed low and true. It was old school. It was Ausrufezeichen. It was exclamation point fair.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about Dortmund as being like this, this last bastion of real footballness. And on the one hand, Fullkrug, he sounds like his name sounds like you're getting it all with him, and yet it also sounds like a really expensive, extravagant night out where a billionaire has basically paid for a full krug of champagne. And that champagne is flowing, and the cups flow over. And I mean, that's the thing with Fullkrug. I mean, surprising that a guy like in his early 30s never played in the Champions League before until this season. So never played in a Champions League semi-final. Sort of that moment. It's magnificent. Again, could it happen anywhere else but Dortmund? In this competition? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, in that petri dish that is their own stadium. By the way, I love that idea that Fullkrug is just the most extreme night out. There's nights out on the Lash, but then there's a night out with Diego Costa. That is the next level. That is Fullkrug. And it was so hilarious that it was him. There were so many elite world-class footballers littered all over that field. But he was the one who was bossing the game. He controlled the ball in the box, dished it off to Sabitzer. Another gentleman feeling the freedom of the weight of Old Trafford off their shoulders. And he span and he volleyed from the edge of the 6-yard box. God bless Donnarumma, who was able to follow it, palm it away. But God, you could hear the sound of the PSG door hinges beginning to buckle. Dortmund boss Edin Terzic had said pre-game that PSG are, quote, purpose-built to win this Champions League. But they didn't muster so much as a first-half shot on goal, James.
No. And as you mentioned, it was Donnarumma. It was Gigio who was kind of, who'd taken pelters by the kind of Parisian press in Barcelona, sort of given like a 0.5 out of 10 for one of his performances in that tie. Very generous. Ultimately, doing well tonight against. And again, as you say, I mean, Edin Terzic has every right to basically say PSG should be in the final, should be winning this competition or whatever, because Edin Terzic is a Borussia Dortmund manager who doesn't have Lewandowski, Haaland, Aubameyang, even Michy Batshuayi. He's got just Fullkrug.
Gio-Reyna, James.
Gio-Reyna. Or even going back further, Chrissy Pulisic. I mean, come on.
Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, again, this is one of those ties which leaves you kind of scratching your head. It's like Dortmund have won again. They topped this with Milan. I mean, it brings us full circle back to Christian Pulisic. Won this group with PSG and AC Milan in it, and it's just completely implausible when you look at their squad, you look at their league form, you look at how flaky they are, and yet you're kind of reminded that as much as we've all got excited, and I'm in Rome at the moment, and Leverkusen are coming to town, but Dortmund did take the title race to the final day last year in the Bundesliga. And, maybe if they'd actually not choked and got over the line, we'll be like, this is actually a really good Dortmund team. It's amazing how perspective works like that. It's just like,
people don't come here for perspective, James. They know that I think I get a 0.5 for perspective. But how do you explain PSG? Kylian Mbappé had the fewest touches of all PSG outfielders in that first half. The pace of the attack did not simmer at all. What was it that put the brake on? Was it the youth of the team, the energy of the stadium, the inability to really batten down midfield at all?
We talked about that wall and that sea of flags, Rog. I think this PSG is still very much a work in progress. It's hard actually to dispute that when PSG have been built to win ever since the Qataris basically bought the club and decided to make it like a soft power project for them. But they seem to have, ever since the World Cup, have said, you know what, let's strip it back. Messi, you go play in Miami. Neymar, you go to Saudi. Verratti, you go to Qatar. And so, what they've actually got, aside from Kylian Mbappé, who is arguably the best player in the world, one of the best players in the world, is a pretty new team. And so I think the midfield in particular is it's pretty raw. It's still learning how to play together, even though we're 7 or 8 months into this season. So the thing is, they've missed chances all year. That was the amazing thing about their group stage travails, where I was sat next to my Parisian colleague, Julien Laurens, who kept grabbing my knee over and over again, kept falling to his knees at every missed chance that PSG had. And, I think it was different for Mbappé tonight, but I think even Mbappé, 2 weeks ago in Barcelona, he scores twice in the 4-1. And people were like, Kylian, it's a statement performance. It's like, well, no, Barca have been down 10 men for 60 minutes. He scored a penalty and he scored in the 89th minute. I'm not sure he actually had that good a game. So it's again, the cognitive dissonance of looking at PSG and what we've come to associate with PSG, and the same with Mbappe, and then actually looking at it in reality and be like, maybe it doesn't quite all work yet.
James Horncastle will not stand for our hyperbole and our reductionism, but second half, the game was shockingly open. It was topsy-turvy. Neither team had neither control nor clinicality. You had former French president and convicted criminal Nicolas Sarkozy just sitting there grim-faced, watching alongside PSG president Nasser Al-Khelaifi. And their team did come out a different proposition second half. So that incredible moment hit both posts within 8 seconds. Oh, poor Julien Laurens must have been in bits, I tell you. And Mbappé arced his body, unleashed a poem. You could see he was running away from the ball, being just like, oh, Kylian, you've done it again, as the ball clipped the right post. Hakimi picked up the slot, drove one against the left-hand post. I bet there's an Italian phrase for that when a team hits both posts within 8 seconds.
It's a good bet to have. It's not one that I can recall off the. I'm trying to think of some kissing idiom or something like that. Bacio a due guance, or kiss on both cheeks or something like that. I don't know, but
love it.
Yeah,
there is now.
There is now.
Yeah, Dortmund somehow still alive. I mean, Sancho just. And burning down that wing, as we've discussed, in a way he never did for United, found Fullkrug up close, delivered what Ray Hudson called a garlic milkshake of a finish. Fullkrug honestly could have had a hat-trick in truth. If that was a garlic milkshake, Dembele blasting over from dead centre with a goal gaping was, I do not know and don't want to think of what kind of milkshake. By the way, I just want to go on record saying I would quite love, I think, a garlic milkshake, to be honest. Astonishing night, astonishing spectacle. This game, very, very much alive going back to Paris. Dortmund will no doubt rue not getting that second or possibly even third goal. PSG will. Well, James, how will PSG feel getting out of Dodge just 1-0 down?
Well, they project this image of not being all that bothered. They're like, well, this year wasn't supposed to be the year when we were supposed to win the Champions League. It's a
Like
team that's in
Everton.
transition. It's young. We're a project. We're a process team. It's like no, you're not. You've still got Kylian. It's his last year. This is going to be his last chance. And I think to be honest, every Champions League game for the last been framed in that. It's like, is this Kylian Mbappe's last Champions League game for PSG? Well, next week, at the Parc des Princes, it will definitely be his last European game at the Parc des Princes, regardless of what the outcome is, because the next game is the final. So, Kylian, it's up to you. It's up to you.
God, I love that. James Horncastle addresses directly Kylian Mbappe. Shouts at that. God, that would be a headline if you were Gary Neville. James Horncastle calls out Kylian Mbappe. It's up to you. He says there was a shot of Terzic, the Dortmund manager, at the end. This kid who grew up as a fan on the yellow wall, now leads his team. The yellow wall behind him, right at the in the 95th minute. All I know is that 25,000 people in there made incredible memories tonight, immense European night memories that they will carry forever, which is incredible to think about. I've actually watched the game on the yellow wall. I am 6'4". I couldn't see a bloody thing, but it was still utterly magnificent just to have that wall of joy and beer and sausage just bouncing around all around you. Rumours abound, actually, that the club, who have a real love of bringing back old characters, are trying to lure former manager Jurgen Klopp back as head of football in 2025, kind of harking back ever more to that 2010 to 13 glory era. That club loves bringing back the old guys, a bit like Chad Michael Murray returning to One Tree Hill, but in German. Chat is buzzing about James Horncastle's turtleneck, which if you're listening to this on a podcast, it just looks like it's from, essentially it's very Steve Zissouzian. Christina Stott says Pep Guardiola is going to be calling James Horncastle about that turtleneck pronto. Where is it from, James? Is it cashmere? If it's not, there'll be no Pep Guardiola call.
No, it's not cashmere. I was self-deprecatingly on my Instagram account today was drawing comparisons with Captain Haddock from Tintin, because it was it's been one rainstorm after another here in Rome. So I had like this big sort of pea coat on. I had this on. I've obviously got the beard, so I looked kind of like this sort of mad sea captain rather than any kind of sort of fashion icon. So, but yeah, it's chunky. I just did not expect to be wearing something this chunky. I bought this in Venice. Is the answer. Yeah,
there you go. Look how modest Horncastle's just spent 3 minutes telling a story. And the whole time he's going, do I tell him? Is it like a humble brag if I tell him I brought it in Venice? No, I'm going to tell him. You got it in Venice. It is just, as you say, mad sea captain. Actually truly captures, I would think, 7 out of 10 of Pep's aesthetic ethos perfectly. And I love it. You look absolutely stunning, and I feel deeply underdressed. Let's move on to last night. Madrid in Bayern. That one ended 2-2. Harry Kane, Jude Bellingham derby. England's two most influential players colliding. A bit like watching English national team Mark Donaldson and Patrick Schweig go up against each other. Miguel Delaney went as far as to call this the English Messi-Ronaldo dynamic. Bit like watching a footballing Herman Bloom take on Max Fischer, to be honest. I do believe, and we'll talk about this, that Bellingham whispered, she's my Rushmore. I know, she was mine too, when he tried to take the penalty, but we'll get to that in the Champions League era. This is incredible. Bayern and Real Madrid have met more times in the semi-final than any other pairing has met in the knockouts at all. There was really a been there, done that vibe ahead of the kickoff. I guess once both managers, Ancelotti and Tuchel, had been sacked by Chelsea, they kind of completed football. And the opening of the game had just an intense familiarity about it all too. Bayern proactive, creating opportunities. Carlo Ancelotti, before the last game against Man City, Jude Bellingham caught him yawning. So unfazed was he by this stage of the tournament. Felt like in the opening minutes, the whole of Real was yawning. Bayern tore at them. Harry Kane running the game from deep mode. But his team blew chance after chance. Sané, the lead offender. And we know there's only one human truth in Champions League football and life. That old Champions League trope, rear guard, rocked Real Madrid will always find a way against a run of play and also against logic. Madrid, we talked about this last time, so inevitable, James. Thomas Tuchel had said pre-game, you don't see Real Madrid's goals coming. And lo and behold, Toni Kroos, 8 years a Bayern player, so much intertwisted narrative here, suddenly just lifted his chin, surveyed the surroundings, and unfurled a pass, which was honestly the only thing I've seen as sexy as this pass is James's turtleneck through the heart of the Munich side. Vinny Jr. read it, ran onto it, left Kim Min-jae in his wake. By the way, Kim Min-jae is Korean for Eric Dyer. And Vinny finished with just hips don't lie clinicality. James, who needs possession? Who needs form? Who needs passing sequences or even good football? Real Madrid just seize moments, big moments, and have that necromancy or whatever kind of forbidden magic they sprinkle upon it. It's incredible.
Yeah, I like how if you look at football over the last 5-10 years, it's all about we're going to bring in sort of American private equity money, corporatize it, and we're going to make it more rational. And the way we're going to do that is bring in analytics, data, thing. And Madrid just look at all of that and just go and just rip it all up and throw it away. There is magical realism about it every time you watch them, where you're just like, this makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, other than the fact that these players are obscenely talented, and they can kill you in a moment. The great thing, and I love that about football, that it's still a moment's game. There are, like Pep Guardiola will try and manage and understand single second of every football game, and yet there are these seconds that get away from you, and Madrid are masters at that. That seems to be what they understand better than any other godly being on the planet, and I love
that notion that they are footballers, if crafted by magical realism, realismo magico. I mean, they're like a football team as if written by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, or as if imagined.
Yeah, he's their sporting director.
F data. Let's make crap up and then make it real. Head cinema, however you see that in Spanish, that is exactly what they are. It is football of the complete and utter imagination. By the way, I did love Kroos's modesty post-game. He said, I saw their centre-backs always follow Vinny. I know Vinny always makes runs into space. That's why all the credits to Vinny. He opened the space, the pass. It was okay. And God bless Vinny Jr., 23 years of age. This is third straight season scoring in the Champions League semi-finals. Just an incredible record, a big game, goal scoring in big moments, so bloody young. Bayern shocked, as if they'd been slapped across the face by a cold Blutwurst. But Thomas Tuchel, Tommy Tactics, lived up to his middle name, made a change at the half, threw on Rafael Guerreiro into midfield. It was his willingness to roam on the left that seemed to change the game. Some surprise at the break that Leroy Sané still on the field. Gent's got a groin injury, which meant he had to keep running around during half-time on field, so he didn't warm down. But the decision paid off quickly. He cut inside, dropped a shoulder, slashed home his first goal since October the 28th last year. It was like watching an Iron Robin tribute band, or if Iron Robin himself had been exhumed from the grave, James.
Yeah, or sort of his great wingman, Ribéry as well. I mean, you talked about the kind of masochistic element of this guy having a groin problem and having to run around, which you'd think would just aggravate it. It sort of reminds me, sort of being someone who follows European sports, exclusively football, and then you turn on the NFL and they'll say this player has gone out in the first quarter. He's blown out. He's torn every ligament in his knee. And then in the second quarter, you see he's on an exercise bike on the side of the pitch, and then he's back in the quarter. I'm like, okay, is this where we're at with soccer now? It's and Sané, to be fair to him, this is his first goal in a long time. He was magnificent against Arsenal in the game against the Emirates. Just an absolute, just a dagger, sort of really incisive games. And Tommy T, who seems to be just like such a hassle for everyone, sort of Todd Bowley at Chelsea, the Qataris at Paris Saint-Germain, Dortmund. He does show these like flashes of brilliance where he's just like, if I just swap my winger and bring on this who can come and play with midfield, maybe we'll turn this Champions League semi-final around. And it's like, oh yeah, it's worked. So he is
a lovely man as a human being. I think as a manager to your front office, he's like the equivalent of getting sand down the front of your swim shorts. But I love your point about the NFL. You don't want to know what happens in that blue tent, the amount of horse placenta those guys guzzle down. It's out of this world. And within minutes, it would get worse. For Real Madrid, Jamal Musiala, the boyhood roommate and best friend of Jude Bellingham, dribbled in a singular style in which he can cut either way with just an effortless aplomb, felled in the area by Lucas Vazquez, almost out of panic. And Harry Kane is done penalty meister, 43 goals and 11 assists now for Harry in 43 games across all comps. Scoring here, we got to talk about it, despite the best efforts of Jude Bellingham to whisper in his ear and put him off. Kane was asked what Jude Bellingham said in that moment before he took the kick. And Harry Kane, this is a real quote. He said, I honestly don't know what he was saying. I saw him mumbling something. So James Horncastle saw him mumbling something. There he goes, old Jude Bellingham, just mumbling away again. What do you think he said, James? Was he like Arsenal, Premier League champions 2023-24?
It's I wonder what he said. Maybe it was just completely abstract in football. Maybe it was like I don't know, Biden in November, something like that. I don't know. But apparently it was just. Do
you think Harry Kane knows who Biden is, James?
Well, if he was so zoned in on this penalty that I even heard Jude Bellingham trash talking, or to be honest, like it doesn't even sound like Jude Bellingham was trash talking. Apparently, all he said was, "You're going to go left, aren't you?" And that's it. It's like, okay, that's for an elite penalty taker like Harry Kane. It's a little bit like Jude Bellingham going up to him and saying, "You play for Bayern Munich, don't you?" So, I do play for Bayern Munich, and I am gonna go left, and I will score because I do. I think
the reality is Harry Kane only speaks German now. It's like genuinely, if you're not coming at me with the German, I don't understand. Ich nicht verstehen, Jude. It's only what he said. By the way, I just want to go on the record as saying Harry Kane is more of a Green Party guy. But Gage Wheeler in the chat wants to get back to the issue of blue tents in the NFL and football. He says Ben White's blue tent is just canisters of spray tan and a Where's Waldo book. God love Gage Wheeler. I love you. That is head cinema, kino, whatever it was, Kopf Kino, Gage Wheeler. God bless you. And the fact that Harry Kane couldn't hear the trash talking. Well done, Jude. Your shithousery, almost at the same levels as his performance on the night, James. It was subdued, exhausted, possibly slightly injured down the stretch, Jude Bellingham in this one. Off kilter, Jude, almost. Substitute with cramp with 15 minutes to go and his team's still a goal down.
Yeah. Cramping up, apparently had a virus, something like that. But also, like, people have forgotten that. Hasn't he been playing with, like, some kind of dislocated shoulder for like 4 months or something like that, or he's got a shoulder issue. I don't know what it is, but
blue tent's it, lad.
Blue tent, rub some of that horse placenta on it.
We don't want to hear his excuses. By the way, this is amazing. This is true. He is deeply injured, a long-term injury. We don't want to hear that crap, though. We just want to say, Jude Bellingham, he was shit. That's genuinely, it's what we want to say and feel better about ourselves.
It is. It is. That's what is the late night show talking points. What's happened to Jude Bellingham? Why is he so crap?
Yeah.
It fuels the social media debate, and there'll come a time. There'll come a time after the Euros where there'll be like a little news line on Real Madrid's website which will say Jude Bellingham has undergone shoulder surgery today, and will probably, that was long overdue. He's been playing with this for 9 months or something, and everyone will be like, "Oh, wow, incredible! What an Iron Man!" Just like
I just assume at this point, when any player has a bad game, that like Javier Mascherano, they're playing with a ruptured anus. I'm just like, maybe Jude Bellingham. Let's all be more charitable instead of just like loving, mocking, calling him a finished player. Let's just imagine. Give people the benefit of the doubt. Give people the benefit of the ruptured anus possible out in this one. Incredible stat, though. If it is a ruptured anus, he's had a lot of them. Bellingham, 9 games against Bayern Munich, 7 losses, 2 draws, no wins, no goals. Sure, the Germans have a word for kryptonite, but then, as the games seem to be running out of steam, substitutes, fatigue just chopping up the flow, slowing it down. On came Modric to up the tempo, as he does so stunningly, to be honest. It's incredible to think that man, 38 years of age, exact same age as Wayne Rooney. Honestly, hard to believe when I say that. They're almost the same species. He is the one man who never seems to slow down, and the other is Vinny Jr., who wriggled his way into the box, played a quick, congested pass to his Brazilian teammate Rodrigo, who tipped and tumbled over an ill-advised Kim Min-jae leg. As they say in Spain, penal. Another early dive, this time from Manuel Neuer, and Vinny blasted his 21st, breaking 20 goals for 3 years in a row. His penalty tying it up at 2s. And that was at Real Madrid. This is incredible. Have not lost the game since January. That's a run of 19 games. 11, though, unbeaten in the Champions League. Second leg back home at the Bernabeu. If Bayern do not find a way to break that streak, it'll be Real Madrid back in the final for a 6th time in the past 11 years. I think Bayern will rue the number of chances that they missed. Ancelotti admitted Real Madrid can play much better. James, what are the big lessons that we learned from this first leg, and what do you predict for second leg 2, Electric Boogaloo?
Well, again, this is Tuchel's probably his final game, and we don't hear anything about big clubs coming in for him, and there's been some big jobs up as well, which is surprising. Maybe on the back of the performance that they gave the other night, people will be like, "Oh yeah, he's still got it." Thomas Tuchel. And then again, like those Brazilian boys up front for Madrid, we mentioned that they don't really do data, they don't really do analytics, do magical. I mean, going back to Gabriel Garcia Marquez being their sporting director, I mean, they signed those kids when they were like 15, when no one really. It's very hard to judge players at that, and yet now they've got a guy who's scored 20 plus goals in 3 straight seasons. Again, it's sorcery, pure sorcery.
That's it. So forget tactics, forget data, magical realism plus sorcery equals unprecedented Champions League glory. Anyway, we're all over the Champions League, James. We love the Conference League. We love the Europa League. You're in Rome for tomorrow's Europa League semi-final between Daniel De Rossi's Roma and German champion, undefeated Leverkusen. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Give us a top line. Give us the smell of the game.
Well, in Rome, they want to beat the streak. They want to put an end to this 46-game unbeaten run that Leverkusen have been on. Of course, this time last year in the semi-finals, Roma actually knocked Leverkusen out. They scored early, and then Jose Mourinho parked one of those trams that Rome sort of goes by. Actually, one goes to the Stadio Olimpico right outside where I'm staying right now. Obviously, Mourinho's no longer around.
By the Caravaggio.
Yes, exactly. Great caravan. If you've been watching Ripley, don't know if you've seen Ripley on Netflix. It's entirely based on Ripley going to shows in Rome when he's not murdering people. So
like yourself.
I'm just here to look at Caravaggio's and watch the football.
Where did you
public
get
at
that
large
turtleneck?
is
Oh, I
safe.
can't tell you. Why is there a huge
Exactly.
gash down and blood down? Oh, anyway, Venice. So essentially, there's a feeling they're going to beat the streak. Are they, James?
I think they can. I think they've got a lot of the similar attributes that Leverkusen have got. They never know they're beaten. They always score late. They've got World Cup winners in their team. They've got World Cup winners in the dugout. Yeah, they've been around the block a bit. They don't take themselves too seriously, which I really like. So, like even today, you had De Rossi in his press conference sat next to Leandro Paredes, who won the World Cup with Argentina, and Paredes was asked while De Rossi was sat next to him, like, what's so good about your coach, and what are the drawbacks? What can he improve on? And he sort of sung De Rossi's praises for 2 minutes, and was like, oh yeah, what can he do better? You know what? To be honest, look at him. He eats far too much. Can you imagine saying that to your manager, who's a World Cup winner? And De Rossi was like, I knew he was going to say that. I knew he was going to point out my weight. It's just incredible. So I think that, to me, is illustrative of the group that they've got here. Team spirit, not order a second helping of carbonara, if that's what the manager wants. And carbonara is often what has won Italian teams big trophies. That was the truth for Inter when they won the treble, and that was in 2010 when you thought nutrition was like people had sort of got on top, really impactful in nutrition rather than just carb loading with sort of belly pork and egg and that sort of thing. But no, carbonara, it's the secret. That will beat Leverkusen tomorrow night.
Being around the block a little bit, don't take themselves too seriously, eats too much, is possibly the most honest but carefully curated online dating profile. We've got to ask you, otherwise I'd be remiss. The big question everyone in the world of football is asking, James Horncastle, where is the best place to get a carbonara in Rome, in your mind, James? Give us the secret.
Oh, I mean, there are too many places. I went to a great restaurant tonight, but it's not really a carbonara restaurant. It's called Zia, which means auntie. I'd really recommend going to that. And then there's, if you want like classic sort of amatriciana, carbonara, gricia, I would say you should go to a place called Penestri. That's near Parliament Building. It's good. So pizzeria, there's a place called I Marmi or Orbitorio, which the morgue, for pizza at the morgue, and it's all on marble where they cool the dough because the marble's really nice and cool. And that's where Fellini used to go back in the day. Marmi is a place where I definitely recommend.
Well, you can't unleash the whole clip now, James. Otherwise, we're going to run out of. I've got a feeling in a couple of weeks' time, we're just going to be doing maybe 1/5 football and 4/5 Horncastle food recommendations. I have so many things to tell you about meals I've eaten in Rome. I'm going to hold them all in because this is not about me. It's about you. Chime on in. If you've got any food questions for the mighty Horncastle, send them our way. A couple of other elements we do need to touch upon. Liverpool Football Club have briefed the press that despite the old argy-bargy on the sideline, Klopp and Mo beefing in public during last weekend's frustrating draw at West Ham. Well, David Ornstein was amongst the first to tweet that Liverpool expect Mo Salah to stay and are planning with him being around for at least another campaign. The 31-year-old has given no indication of wanting out. Well, he did kind of give an indication on the sideline. Contract will be addressed in due course. The Saudi view is Salah intends to remain at Liverpool next season, which is fascinating. What do you think of them apples, James Horncastle? Feels like quite, if you're on a slot arriving, a little bit like Ten Hag had to deal with the Ronaldo piece of flapping skin. Get it wrong, and in Salah's words, there will be fire. Do you feel that tying him down has greater merit than risk for Liverpool Football Club?
I mean, the Ronaldo comparison is quite interesting, just on a sort of abdominal level. I think that's they're very much. I think a lot of people talk the Ronaldo rivalry, but really, in terms of those 6-packs or 9-packs, 12-packs, whatever, it's very much Ronaldo thing. So maybe that's what the Saudi Pro League needs, in order for it to go to the next level, to transcend. And they're just doing what in Italy they'd call depistaggio, which is laying false trails by saying, he's not coming, we're not interested, but really they just want to see some of Salah's abs, going to Al Hilal and Al Ittihad.
False trails.
Yeah,
I love that. I love that. It sounds like the best Lloyd Cole album of all time. So essentially, you think there is some truth, but you're also very kind of cynical about this laying down this new media line because of what was the word? Depistaggio.
Depistaggio. Yeah.
God bless.
No, I'm not. Yeah. I'm just applying magical realism to football directing here. If I were Liverpool, I'd maybe look at it and say he's 31 now. What new contract? What duration of his contract is he going to want? How much are we going to have to pay him? Because a lot of clubs get to when they're 30s, they say we'll give you a 1-year deal and it'll just roll over. So considering how people are very focused on data analytics and contract management and squad assembly and that sort of thing, I think it's quite interesting what their thinking might be. Not only with him, but with some of the other roles in the squad, like Big Virgil. So yeah, let's see.
Sod data. Liverpool, get onto the magical realism tip. One more Liverpool note. Liverpool women tonight sensationally beat Emma Hayes Chelsea 4-3. 90th minute goal denting Chelsea's title dreams. Manchester City now need just 4 points from the last 2 games, which would leave Emma Hayes trophyless in her final year before she becomes US Women's National Team coach. Godspeed, Emma. We can't touch upon Liverpool without mentioning the pride of Merseyside, Everton Football Club, who are having themselves a week. Survival against all odds and all points deductions. For a bit dark this week, unbelievably grim actually. Everton have held talks with debt restructuring advisors and face a risk of administration. That's bankruptcy, American listeners, if it fails to deal with its heavy debt burden and keep funding day-to-day activities. 777 are Lord and Saviours. They're kind of our saviours in the same way as Scatman Carruthers came to the rescue in The Shining, ended up just getting an axe in the old forehead. One of their many businesses. I don't know why I'm laughing. This is just so miserable. This is not why we watch football. To talk about debt restructuring and the fact that 777 has a budget airline called Bonza. I mean, by the way, if you're going to name an Australian budget, what kind of a marketing meeting did they have when they're like, hey, what are we going to name this Australian budget airline? What we call it? Bonza. All right, mate. I mean, it's like they got Ange Postecoglou just to name it in a press conference. Mate. Should we call it mate or should we call it We'll call it Bonza. Okay, so they got this bloody airline and it went bankrupt. It's yesterday. Oh, no, it's Sunday. Had all of its planes repossessed. So Everton, not so great, is it? James Horncastle, can I ask you, have you ever thought about buying a Premier League team? And can I interest you in Everton?
I mean, if Everton goes into administration is one of those clubs where you can pick up, then maybe. But yeah, it's all bleak, isn't it? I mean, Bonza as a airline again, like it does just feel like, I don't know if our American listeners are familiar with the long-running Australian sitcom, not even sitcom, just a series called Neighbours.
Yes.
Where they would have pets called, like, Australians would call a pet like Bouncer. All right, Bouncer. And it just feels like maybe their way of like naming companies they owned in Australia was to just go through pets in Neighbours.
I think 777 are watching this and thinking maybe we should just reopen the airline under a different name, Bouncer. They're just taking James Horncastle's ideas now. This is genuinely a horror show. I just love that they called it Bonza, though. It's just so unbelievably half-assed. God, that's the second mention of Neighbours. Bloody hell. Come on, let's start a GoFundMe and save Everton Football Club. Hot takes only in the chat. Quick question for you. Timo Werner in the chat wants to know James Horncastle, ketchup on pasta.
No.
Who says no?
No.
Have you become
Timo.
like an Italian? Have you recalibrated your taste buds?
I think it's a bit of cosplay. It's a bit of it's very method, I would say. In terms of like you it's like sort of it's De Niro playing Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver. You have to become that person, and so I have to become Italian in order to do this convincingly, and that's just a no. Even though the most famous sort of example of like, I don't know, a variation of ketchup on pasta is the pineapple on pizza thing. And arguably Naples' most famous pizzaiolo, pizza maker, he did this whole thing this summer where he was like, you know what?
Who's that?
He's a guy called Gino Sorbilo. And he was like, you know what? I'm going to put pineapple on pizza and I'm going to make people love it. And he tried, and I think I'd be convinced that it's a good thing. I'm not necessarily anti it, but that's certainly something that
is that Sorbio?
Yeah.
Is that the restaurant?
Sorbio, yeah.
God,
they have one. The thing is, they have some in Milan. I think I don't know if they have one in Rome. But the thing is, like all of these pizzerias that are in Naples, like even when they branch off into like, let's say they do a New York one or a London one, the problem is like the mozzarella,
the water,
and the mozzarella is perishable within like 12 hours. So like I've got Italian friends of mine who live in Turin who will drive down to Naples, which is a long drive, come back with some mozzarella and eat it like fruit the same day, because that stuff that we buy in supermarkets is just, it's not. So the idea that you could have a pizzeria that those guys have in London, New York, and it'd be of the same quality that it is in Naples, it's just it's very difficult to achieve.
Look at this,
That's diplomatic.
I got my Naples sweatshirt on here. My Naples pizza sweatshirt on here. You're there in your turtleneck cosplay. Here I am pretending that I'm having a pizza tasting menu. By the way, I've got my little Roscioli mug here, which you bang on the nose. A great Rome eatery. Come to New York, but the water's different, the cheese tastes different. I mean, it's a complete different reality in every single regard. But I do love your notion. You put on the turtleneck, you just start dropping the vowels off the end of food, and you are just like in a completely different frame of mind. We do have to talk quickly. We're going to take your questions. My God, I love talking to the Horncastle. How often do you get to move from Paul Auster to travelling mozzarella and back again with a bit of football sandwiched in between? We'll take your questions in 1 minute. I do want to give you a quick update, dear listeners, on the 2027 World Cup, the Women's World Cup hosting. Now that the United States and Mexico have pulled out of their joint bid to host, I think they realised they just did not have the votes. That decision as to whom will host will be made 17th of May. I've spoken to a lot of human beings who do understand FIFA and the weird world of criminology there. The consensus seems to be, this is kind of incredible, FIFA told the United States not to bid for 2027. They needed to give it to South America because they pissed off South America by giving Saudi Arabia the Men's World Cup in 2034. But then the head of the Brazilian Federation, Ednaldo Rodrigues, he only got himself done for, quote, irregularities, which then made it seem as if the German, Belgium, Netherlands high techno bid would get it. But then he was reinstated by the Brazilian Supreme Court, which is not corrupt at all. I just want to go on the record. Brazilian Supreme Court, not corrupt at all. And so it remains to be seen what FIFA are going to do. But FIFA, knowing FIFA, will Brazil it up. Mostly because the stadia that they need to construct there, it's good business. We can talk more in questions if that's of interest. I honestly hate all of this, talking about Bonza Airlines and stadia in Brazil. None of this is why we watch, but we've got to discuss it because no one is watching the footballing Watchmen. to your questions here on YT Live. Scan that QR code in the top left of your screen or click the pinned comment in the chat to come on. You're going to a Zoom with our producer J-Dubs and Tony. He'll tell you everything you need to know. First question. It's from Joshua in Brooklyn, New York. Come on up, Joshua, you beautiful human being. You're on with James Horncastle. What's your question?
Oh, I'm honored to be on. So I want to talk about my Bundesliga team, Dortmund, here. I know I talk about Arsenal mostly, but we're top of the league. We don't have any problems. We're going to win the league clearly. So let's talk Dortmund for a second.
Okay.
So I was watching this match, right? And first of all, it moved at such a quick pace that I didn't actually have time to be nervous, right? Like I didn't have any time for anxiety because like it didn't slow down enough for me to be like nervous or anxious. But I'm watching this and I'm like, any other stadium in the world, I think Dortmund likely would have lost. But there was some divine, magical, mystical intervention that was preventing the ball from going into the back of the net and giving PSG a goal. So my question is this, can they keep this up on the road, at PSG? Because in watching this, there's like a Jekyll and Hyde thing going on here, where this is such a different team than the one that plays in the Bundesliga each week. I'm just wondering if we're like underestimating their chances of like advancing, especially because I don't know. I think they can hold on to a 1-0 lead at Paris, but I guess I'm curious about your thoughts.
I've got a question for you before James answers. Really, two questions there, James. I mean, how much of this Dortmund phenomena is a sense of place? And then I guess the question is, and this is one we've got in the chat from Vic Riz, do you think Dortmund has any chance, real chance in the second leg? But James, before we get into that, Joshua, you just said my German team, which I find truly fascinating. We just done a study of American fandom and its singularities, which we're going to bring out in a couple of weeks' time. And one of the first things that's most astonishing and wonderful about it, shorn of place, like where I grew up, Liverpool, you become, an Everton fan, a Liverpool fan. If you're from Manchester United City, geography drives your fandom. Shorn of geography here. America, I think it was something like 37% of American fans said they had at least 3 teams that they followed. Many had more, my German team, my Italian team. How many teams do you have is the question, Joshua. And I'm genuinely fascinated with awe and reverence. Yeah.
Well, I have 3. I mean, Arsenal, Dortmund, and then whoever's playing Spurs. No, I thought we established that I hopped on a EasyJet flight from Luton, and because I couldn't afford Premier League tickets, and I ended up in Dortmund. That's how I became a Dortmund fan.
You are James Horncastle's story lived out in real life, which leads to the mighty Count Horncastle himself. How much of the Dortmund performance tonight, James, was, I love that idea, any other football ground, any other night, and Dortmund would have lost, but that magic of team plus place equals glory, and just give us a sense of whether, shorn of home turf, home joy, home ebullient rapture, whether they'll be the same team in the second leg.
Well, within the analytics community, there is a lot of talk about a new concept, which is unquantifiable, and it's called vibes. And I think and there are some teams where you look at them on a night when they play at home, and it's like, is this just vibes here, or is there an actual very meticulous tactical plan going on here? Has Edin Terzic understood exactly all the weak points and how to exploit them in this PSG team? Or are they riding this wave that is, pouring out from the yellow wall? I think one of the really interesting things about the Champions League, and we saw it last year with AC Milan and Inter, is that teams that are miles out of the title race, in Dortmund's case, in the Bundesliga, in their case last year, they were 25 points off Napoli or something like that in Serie A. it means that their season comes down to this, and they put everything into it. It becomes the main focus, and they kind of overachieve. Because as we were talking at the top of this show, it was kind of implausible that Dortmund would get this far, and yet now they're only 90 minutes away from a final, which really does kind of focus the mind. And it's a 90-minute game. It's a final before a final, and so in terms of the atmosphere tonight, yes, I do think as much as there are proper football men out there, I've heard like Gianluigi Buffon, the famous Italy goalkeeper, say this: I've never seen a crowd score a goal, but I've seen some crazy stuff in a football stadium without smoking any peyote, and that's just that's the magic of football. And so yeah, I mean, in terms of throwing forward to next week, I can at this stage see Dortmund going through. They're still not necessarily my favourites, because I just think PSG have one of the best players in the world who hasn't turned it on, as I think I mentioned, in Mbappé, as much as people I think he has, but he's still capable of that. And as long as he will remain a very potent threat unless he gets injured this weekend.
By the way, I love your notion of vibes, and I cannot wait for the data point XV, expected vibes, to start popping up on the broadcast graphic. Sean Dyche well ahead of the curve. He invented the concept of Fooking vibes, spelled Fookin. And I just adore
Dyche, who's been in a music video. Have you seen this music video?
Blossoms.
Yeah.
Name the band. By the way, when I first saw it, you can see it on the Everton website. There's a video of Blossoms, a band from Stockport, which is just outside of Manchester, explaining how and why they got Sean Dyche into their music video. I actually thought they'd just taken clips of Sean Dyche saying weird stuff from other videos. No, Sean Dyche was actually... and you can hear the story behind it on today's Early Kickoff podcast, on our Early Kickoff podcast stream. Just Google Early Kickoff Men in Blazers and you will find it. It's an incredible story. Sean Dyche, massive music fan. The story involves a Rick Astley concert. I will leave it there, but it is unbelievable. Shout out to Blossoms for just he's a good lad. He's just very funny. He's very down to earth. He's very method in his acting, is one of my favourite lines. Yeah, he fucking loves his music. It's God, you know what? We've all got something that we're good at, Sean, and yours is music. God, last question before we go, because we're almost at an hour, and I don't want to keep you, James, because I know you've got a massive day tomorrow. But it is to pull this together. It's one from James K in South Dakota, who asks, Rog, the scenes in Dortmund tonight, truly moving, got me jonesing for a trip to experience it all in person. Heard you talk a little bit about it last night on European Nights with Rory Smith. But for those of us who have not been to Dortmund, where should it fall on our football bucket list? Is there anything that compares? There's no better man to ask than James Horncastle. I mean, in terms of bucket list places, you're a gentleman that roams around Europe. You've been, you've seen, you've smelt. Give us your top three.
Well, I think anyone who loves football should go and watch football in Argentina. So that's not Europe, but it's closer. Is it closer to the US? You just
same time zone. It's fantastic. Just get off that flight. You're ready to go. It's amazing.
Yeah. So that's top of the bucket list, I would say. In Europe, I would say come to Rome. Certainly in the last 4 years, the atmosphere at the Stadio Olimpico is just incredible. It feels like it's a one club city rather than a two club city with Lazio. And then the other thing I would say is go to San Siro as well. Go and watch a game with Inter or Milan. If at best, go watch the derby. That is a truly, I think people were reminded of it in the Champions League semi-finals last year, how special that atmosphere and how special that ground is, because it's just this concrete arena which just sweats history. It really does. And it's I'd love going. It's a privilege to go there every time I get the opportunity.
I couldn't agree more. I've been to that derby. I mean, if you love football and anger smoking through football, that game is utter made for you. I was actually at Roma for the very first time this December. I saw Lukaku defang Napoli in the most joyous way, and it was a genuinely memory-soaked, a very different vibe, a very beautiful evening. Is there a hidden, less obvious must see in Italy? Are you going to pluck out Empoli? Como Serie B is where I want to go when they come up into the big time. That story is unbelievable. But is there a connoisseur's choice that you'd throw out in Italy for us?
Well, Parma got promoted today as well. Parma, for a certain generation, people get very fond of them. I think in atmosphere, definitely go to Genoa. Go to particularly at the moment, even though they are owned by your would-be owners, the Bonza Airline guys, 777. Because they got them relegated in the first year, but the vibes were so good that they bounced back up, and because they bounced back up, it's this is amazing. Often teams that go down from the Premier League like being in the Championship more because they can actually maybe win the Championship in a way that they just can never win the Premier League. And it's sort of the same in Italy with the second division. And so the atmosphere at the Luigi Ferraris is like a proper chocolate box ground, no running track. But they don't have what's called in Italy, the ends behind the goals are called curva. It literally means the bend. The south curve or something like that, south bend. But in Genoa, they're called the gradinata. And gradinata is steps. It's I suppose you could say it's proper terraces. And so that makes it pretty special. The unfortunate thing is that Sampdoria in the second division at the moment, Genoa in the top flight. So you're not going to get to see the Derby della Lanterna, the lighthouse derby, as it's known. But that is that feels quite South American, in the land of pesto. That is Genoa. So,
I would love to come here. I can imagine 777 trying to persuade Genoa to change their name to Bonza. It's only a couple of letters, mate, and it's good vertical integration for the brand. I would love to go to a Genoa game with you. I would love to go to an Atalanta game. God, it is delirious, the life you lead. It is a joy to hear from your mouth. I want to thank everybody for their calls. We're at an hour, and I do want to get James Horncastle off to bed. He's got a big day tomorrow. Before we do go, look at everything coming up at Men in Blazers World Headquarters. All of it sponsored by Michelob Ultra, superior light beer. Tomorrow on the Men in Blazers podcast feed, it's a beautiful episode of Vamos. With the recovering Daryl DK, that great Oklahoman who's recovering from a second Achilles injury. What an agony. It's quite an emotional episode. Both Daryl and Herc are quite brilliant in it. Can't wait for you to hear it. It'll drop on the Men in Blazers podcast feed tomorrow. On the Women's Game feed, a wonderful conversation between Sam Lewis and Manchester City star and her former teammate Alex Greenwood. City, by the way, one step closer to that Women's Super League title. I will be back on Friday with a Paul Mullin podcast special. What a Wrexham, John. What an incredible human being. We've also got Anthony Robinson jumping on to come and spend some time with us talking about the Copa America and his imminent second child. Godspeed to the Robinson family. All in our latest episode of This Week in Wrexham coming soon, powered by Stoke Cold Brew. Until then, all that is remaining for me to do is just thank you so deeply, James. There are few human beings that have your range. You have got Cruz range. What Cruz can do with the ball, you can do with the mind. I think we're all the better for it, you beautiful human being.
It's Fullkrug. Fullkrug is what I bring.
Always. Well, yeah, when you're a grandfather and your grandchild turns around to you and says, "Grandpa James, what is the secret of life?" and you say, "Always go Fullkrug, son. Always Fullkrug." And to you listeners, we hope you all attack life for that Horncastle Fullkrug spirit. Big love. It's Rog saying courage.